field service community was I just didn't want to be in debt.
Right.
And so I think, and when I told the counselor at Chapel Hill, he said, John, he's like, we have a lot of people that have not come back after their summer internship, but you're the first person to drop out after the first semester to take a job. I was like, well, that's great. I'm on record at Chapel Hill
For a
first
semester.
dropout
Yeah.
in the MBA program. So.
Well, I think when you were at Simmons, and we were talking about this earlier, I felt like you always set yourself apart because you had this in-depth field research going on. So I told you that I remember one of the first reports of yours that I opened was a picture of like a 10-year-old boy in front of a frac truck. And I was reading about the Daniel family spring break to the Eagleford. So that in and of itself is so different from any other research report that you're going to open. And so kind of just curious of how you really got out there, how you convinced your family to do it with you in some cases, and why you really chose that was the right path.
So what I learned from my time at Key, as I got the first few years, I probably didn't learn much because I was in East Brunswick. But once I came to Texas and really started having the chance to interact more with folks on the team, realized a lot of the folks had grown up in the oil field. They used to tell me how I got on the rig location with my dad or whatever. And so it was 2009. The market was kind of crappy, and so rather than the Daniel family trying to do a really nice Christmas spring break to Colorado for skiing, we did the budget trip and we went just right outside Austin. And as I was mentioning to you earlier, I don't have a lot of hobbies, and so I was bored. Right? I was like, I don't want to sit by a pool. So I got my kids and we went down to Victoria. We went to Dallas, and just took my son down to where did we go? Cotulla. Figure everybody should go to Cotulla once in their life. And so we did the tour, and everybody was very open. Like, hey, bring your kids by. We probably violated some OSHA rules. My daughter got to drive a forklift. I don't think you're supposed to do that in 5th grade, but we didn't put that photo in the note. But we just, we made a very personal trip, and I put the photo in the note, and was amazed at the response. Like, everyone's like, holy cow, that's great. You took your kids. Next time you bring your kids to see me here and there. So over the course of 5th grade through the sophomore year in college, we've been across the country. I think my son has been to every basin except maybe California, but we've done Christmas break in Oklahoma. We did a Christmas in Cushing tour. We've been to Utica in Christmas. My son and I drove to Williston, North Dakota to go see people in the summer of 2020. We're just out there all the time. And what I learned is you can't do research by just picking up the phone and calling people and asking for data points. I mean, I have to do that every now and then, but you have to go develop the personal relationships. And I think what I learned from my days at Key Energy, because I was responsible for investor relations, and what I'm about to say is not meant to be a slight on anyone. It'll probably come across that way, but we had a number of analysts that covered our stock at the time. And I'd say maybe half of them were engaged with us, where they would come, call us on a regular basis, try to come to Houston to see us. But the other half were MIA. And the only time we ever saw anything was they would just basically cut and paste what we said on a conference call and put it in a note. And I asked somebody one day, as I was getting ready to leave Key, or thinking about leaving Key, I said, what do you make as an analyst on Wall Street? And they told me the numbers. I was like, wow, that's a lot different than what I make at Key. I was like, shit. I said, I can go do that. And
I've wondered sometimes.
I joined Simmons, and I realized that and the first advice I got from a gentleman, I don't know if you remember, if you ever interacted with Scott Gill.
Yes.
He was a great guy. He's now pastoring a church up in Tyler. And Scott told me from early on, he said, Johnny, you can't just report the news in this business. You got to make the news. And so I had the lowest SAT scores of anyone at Simmons. So I knew I had to get out and do something to distinguish myself. And so I just started driving out to see people. And it wasn't like everybody was welcoming to me day one. It took a long time to develop relationships. I mean, but you had to be intentional about it. And I would go speak at, I'd get opportunities to speak at but like the AESC or PISA. You'll go speak at those events, go speak at an IADC event. I mean, I just was training this with a guy who's an E&P company, and we were talking about how he remembers me coming out to the Rice Bowl. I don't know if you know about the Rice Bowl, but it's in Bakersfield.
No.
It's like where the AADE and the AEC would always do their meetings.
Okay.
It's not the Four Seasons, but it's the Rice Bowl. But when you go to Bakersfield once or twice a year, you start to become friends with people in Bakersfield. If you go to, most people don't drive to Gillette, but when you go to Gillette, you start to know these folks. So, and I just find that to be so much more fun than playing in Excel. And I realized early on I wasn't very good at picking stocks. And so, and my vocabulary wasn't as good as Bill Herbert. If you know Bill's notes, you need a thesaurus to read his research. And so mine are 3-letter, 4-letter words, and keep it simple and just go see people. And, but what you have to realize is, most people don't want what they say attributed to them.
Right.
So when my mom asked me, what the hell do you do for a living? I say, well, I'm kind of like an investigative reporter, Mom. And so you go out and you see people but you can't just see one company. You can't go see one well service company and say, well, this is what's going on well servicing, because they could be dead ass wrong.
Right.
Right. And
you have to get all the different data points.
You have to see everybody. Right. And I can't just listen to, again, I'm going to make up names here and I'll probably offend them. And it's not meant to be, but like, I can't go see, Halliburton, ProPetro, and Liberty and ask about what's going on the capital equipment side for frac. I mean, I will, but then I got to go see you at NOV. I got to see Dragon. I got to see Freemire. And then you got to take it one step further, and you got to go see the GD Energy Services, the SPMs, the CATs, the Cummins, and then like literally yesterday, I'm talking to a forging company. You got to go across the entire spectrum,
right?
And it's the whole mosaic theory to try to figure out what's going on, and I find that to be a blast. And so,
how do you? How do you decide, because like I like the idea of investigative reporting, but how do you decide like what's the lead you're going to pursue? How do you even approach like the stories that you're going to follow?
Sometimes it's just what the answer to an open-ended question.
Okay.
Like literally the forging company I spoke to yesterday made a comment that, they obviously would participate in the fluid end market, right? That's why I was calling them, because I'm working on a brief note on the fluid end market for this Sunday. And person made a comment that they're seeing a rise in demand for forgings tied to I'm going to say this wrong, the aeronautics space, and actually, like the marine space, not tied to energy. I was like, okay. What, dig into that. And so here I am. So this person could be making forgings for the oil service market and making no money because it's been a dog's breakfast for us the last couple of years.
Right.
Or he's getting some interesting opportunities to go outside of traditional energy. Well, what's the risk factor then to the ultimate, to the industry for oil service? Well, if forging people all start to migrate to things where they can make money, and there's a call for fluid ends. I mean, I'm early on. I've only talked to one forging guy so far. I've got more calls to make, but this is something I'm working on now. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe this is a one-off. I don't know. We'll find out. But I hadn't expected to hear about that when I did the call.
Right.
And so those are the fun things, is when you kind of see something, or maybe you drive by a yard and I go through your factory as an example, and I see equipment there with a new logo of a new company. Well, I might not know that they exist. This happened all the time the last 10 years. That's why you have to, when you regularly go into these factories where equipment is being built, whether it be a wireline unit, a coal unit, a frac unit, I don't really care, and you see a new logo, like, hey, I didn't know that company existed. Oh, well, yeah, they're a new company. They're ordering.
Tell me more about it. Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to learn that listening to a public company conference call, right? Because, that's just, you have to go see it and kick the tires.
Right.
So
it's almost just being super observant, asking open-ended questions, finding an interesting morsel, and following it if it compels you. And then probably be willing to drop a story if it comes to nothing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want to just make something up just to have something to write. I don't want to do that. That's kind of unethical and wrong. So you don't do that. But sometimes you go down a path, and I might have an idea that, hey, the market's getting better, right? And then you go do all the channel checks. You're like, oh crap, it's not. Mm-hmm. You have to change your opinion. You can't, if you learn new facts that change the scenario, you just have to you have to adapt, right, to when news is changing. And so
right.
I don't know. You got to talk to a lot of people. You can't just talk to one company. You got to talk to everybody.
Well, I was going to say,
that's the whole point.
The story definitely can't be written before you
That's right.
have all those conversations.
I can have a theory before you write the story, But if you're wrong, you better not write the story, or
Right.
just say, I had this theory and I was stupid because I was
Right.
wrong.
Right. You
And
don't
so,
have
and
to
just
adhere to your hypothesis the whole time if you start finding things that disprove it.
right. And I'm not always going to be right. I mean, I had to talk to my wife, right? I'm wrong all the time. So you just, but you try to do the best you can.
Right.
So,
Are there any questions that you use or like have always found to be fruitful in certain conversations? Like I remember one time talking with someone in corporate development, and one of their go-to questions that they said when they were kind of looking at buying a company was, clearly you've got it figured out. Like you've got it figured out. What are people underestimating, or what do they not appreciate about what makes this business work? Or how you can succeed within it. And it kind of got them insights into what sets the company apart, what people are overlooking, what the market's like. And I was just curious, do you have any kind of go-to questions or ones that you lean on more heavily?
I'm pretty direct when I'm behind closed doors. Like, how's business? Is it good, bad? Why is it good? Why is it not good? I mean, you do the open-ended questions. Where it gets interesting is, let's say I talk to a well service company and we start talking about the market and they provide some color on what they're seeing. Now that commentary I can take to the next well service company, not ever saying who I talk to
Right.
or being specific about, but hey, this is what I'm hearing. What do you think? And then they can opine. And now I've got two, and it's a rolling effect. And I find that the more and so just by the time you do your last call, you really know the right questions to be asking. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And but that first call was probably not as productive as the last one,
Right.
because I didn't really know what to hone in on the first one. So I don't think there's one set question. I think, but when for some of these people that I go see, I've known for 20 years, and I can be very direct and say, where are your margins today? Are you hiring? Are you firing? What are your wages? What are they going to be in 3 months? And look, no one has any freaking idea what's going to happen in 6 to 12 months, right? It's like we like to pretend we do, but we really don't.
Right.
Things change quickly in this business. I'm sure you've seen this in your career now. When you were planning your budget in 2019, it probably didn't turn out to be correct in 2020.
Correct.
Weird stuff happens. And so, when people try to give me long-term views, you hear it, you listen to it, but it's guesswork. But really, what's going on the next 2 to 3 months? What are the pinch points? And it's, I'll stop there and let you go to the next question, but that's, be flexible.
Right. No, I could see that. When you kind of going out in the field, and I'm sure, and this is probably for any conversation too, sometimes when you're doing reporting or research, you feel like one conversation is going to be really good and it might be a bit of a letdown. And so, and then other conversations may surprise you. So I'm kind of just curious for you, what distinguishes a good conversation or a fruitful conversation from a less than helpful one? And similarly, like a good trip versus a bad trip out to the field?
Yeah, I'd say the tougher meetings are those first meetings when you've never met the company before, because they really don't know who you are. And so those folks are always going to be much more guarded with what they have to say. And, whereas again, the person you've known for 15 years, it's more free flowing. Not every field tour is going to uncover major revelations. And so you can't, I would like to say that in a good year, you might catch 1 or 2 inflection points, something that's really different. Most of the other time, the trips are just kind of catching up on what's going on. And there's no major change, which from a reporting standpoint is boring, because there've been a lot of times I've written notes, the last year and a half where I say, went to the Permian, went to the Bakken, no major revelations, and people hit delete probably. But but that's the truth.
Right.
I mean, it's not everything is sexy every single trip. I wish it were, but it's not. And so the fruitful trips are when you uncover maybe emerging companies that people don't know, or like I would say, you talked earlier, I think we talked about this before that we started, do you ever write things or do things that might be contrarian?
Yes.
Well, I'll give you a good example. And it's not because I'm smarter than anybody. I promise you I'm not. It's just because you talk to more people. But back in the summer of 2021, we were pretty outspoken with our views that oil service pricing was going to be up a lot.
Okay.
And I remember we wrote a note where it's going to be up like 20% plus.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I tell you, every time I write it, I'm probably going to tick somebody off. Well, I had some feedback that came in from E&P contacts. They're like, there's no way. And if you go back and listen to the Q2 earnings calls and definitely the Q1 earnings calls, the narrative that was being presented at that point, it's not that they were lying. They're not. But it was, hey, we're not seeing any change in service costs. We're not seeing change. We hadn't seen it then. But you have to be talking to the mindset of the oil service company where they say, I can't find people. My equipment is in disrepair. I eliminated my 401k match. I got to put it back in. People took pay cuts. I got to start paying them.
Right.
And you're sitting there going, well, there's no way that this business is going to continue at the current pricing. It's not sustainable. We're all it's just not going to happen. And then, sure enough, it's not because my crystal ball's great. But what are we seeing now? We are seeing double-digit price increases. The push to get pricing up is significant, and it varies between product line. I'm not going to get into that minutia, but there is a real effort on the part of the industry to get pricing up. The other thing that we wrote about, which again, it might be sensitive, but there was, I call it, it's the Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. You have any release that you're reading on the E&P space, and kudos to them. They're my clients. I love them. I hope they do great.
Right.
But it was, look at the free cash flow, look at the increases in dividends, increases in buybacks, et cetera, and that's great. I really, really want them to do well. But then you go see the other side.
The other side of the chain.
Haven't put their 401k match back in place. And it's like, we have this labor situation. You can't find people. You got to pay people to attract them, right? It's hard to go to somebody and say, hey, we think you should join our company, and we just cut your pay, and you've got no 401k match, and you've got a high deductible plan, and your premiums are going up for healthcare. That's not a good recruiting tool.
Right.
And so we got to lift everybody up in this market as best we can.
And it's going to have an impact across the business.
But that was contrary to what was being written, and it might have been in your face, and that's okay. But that was what I was hearing, and that's what I wrote about. And you've seen examples like this. It's once or twice a year that you might have something that you write about that's just different than what the narrative is that you're hearing on the conference call.
Do you have advice for people, like even in business or in writing, whatever it may be, of if they have to deliver, it's not really bad news, but it's that contrarian view of basically telling someone what you believe is wrong. And here's kind of the other side of that. I mean, are there tips on how to do that, or are you just blunt and direct and have facts to back it up?
Yes. The short answer is when I make a statement that I think pricing is going to be going up 20%, I've got a very strong reason why I believe that. Look, you got to have, at the end of the day, you have to have thick skin. And I didn't always have thick skin doing this business. I was, a delicate little flower early on and would get bothered when people would criticize me. Yeah, sometimes I still get bothered. I'm not going to lie. But just call it like you see it. What's the worst they can do? Cancel their subscription. Okay. Right. Life goes on, right? And but just call it like you see it. And hopefully, if you're a CEO of a company, you better be willing to, hear feedback that you don't like. And if you can't, then you're not a very good CEO.
Well, I imagine that you, even as like in your role, that you like constructive feedback from people reading a report and potentially calling you and being like, wait, John, have you considered this other perspective? I don't know how often that happens, but
I really like it when people send me nice notes, say, John, this is awesome. You're great. You love those, the attaboys, but you have to have constructive feedback.
Right.
Right. Because if I miss something, I want to know. By the way, I just had a client today, or not today, this week, sort of give me feedback that was actually very critical. And I said, well, man, why didn't you tell me 6 months ago when I published the thing, right? Mm-hmm. And walk me through what you think I factually said that was incorrect. And because I'll correct it. Like I said earlier, I'm not always going to be right.
Right.
So if I make a mistake, I want someone to call me and say, you made a mistake, and here's why. Because that's how you make a better product. That's how you become more informed. But I think a lot of people, it's hard to tell somebody, your business sucks, or you're stupid, or you're not a very nice person. But sometimes you need to hear that.
Right.
Sometimes you need to say it. And I think a lot of people who probably read my note are just nice and they don't want to offend me. That's okay. Send me a note. Tell me where I'm off.
Well,
and And sometimes I might be off today, but the view turns out to be right 3 months from now. Like, we can debate that and be professional, be adults, and we can agree to disagree.
Well, that's what I was going to
So
say. On the feedback, probably a lot of delivery plays a big part of that, of the way that I deliver that message to someone.
it helps. I mean, look, there are some people can just be flat out annoying. I mean, I had a guy literally that I took off the distribution list because he said, "Hey, you misspelled this word." I was like, "Seriously?
It's
You're
not
going to correct my
helpful.
spelling?"
Yeah.
And it was like every week. "Hey, I think you meant to spell." And I don't think I have a lot of spelling errors. I'm pretty good about checking work. But this, like that stuff. Okay, I'm tired of you. I'll move on. But if it's something like that's actually legitimate criticism, like, I'll listen to it and I'll try to learn. So
You do have a really distinctive writing style. I feel like you're very familiar, to use a $5 word. I mean, it's jocular tone, but it's like, it's easy to read, it's entertaining, it's straightforward. Like, have you always written that way, and do you write fast, or does it take time?
generally, the notes get saucier the more wine I drink at night.
They're quite
Look, I don't.
entertaining. I mean, they make me laugh. I will say, like, I'm always like, wow, that's a great point, but then also, that's funny.
Well, like a lot of people, I'm just not that. There are some. I can't stand the technical stuff. Like, people always send me their white papers, like, "Hey, you read this."
Right.
I'm like, this is Mandarin to me. I don't understand what the heck you just said in this. So I try to keep it simple. I try to keep it direct. I try to keep it short. I mean, I can't
Attention
tell you how many
spans.
times you read a research note at 6 pages and you could have done it in 2 sentences,
Right.
right? And why waste your time? You're busy. You've got a lot to do. Are you really going to sit down and read a 30-page report on the compression industry? No. Give me 3 paragraphs. What the heck's going on? Like that. So there might be a few people that read the whole thing. And honestly, it's easier to keep it simple, frankly.
Well, sometimes when I try to keep things simple and short, I feel like it takes me a long time to write. Like, I want to be really intentional with what each sentence is. And I remember reading somewhere where someone said that the best advice they got was to work for a newspaper because they needed to learn how to write with where their work was going to be used to wrap fish up the next morning, of kind of just like,
Right.
this is ephemeral. Like, it's going to be, make your point, someone will read it, but they're not going to publish it in a book, always reference it every day. And I don't know, like, how you approach even just the day-to-day writing of, is it quick, or is that kind of the mindset you have of someone's going to read this and then move on?
I definitely believe people are going to read it and move on because things change so quickly in oilfield service. So my typical week is weekdays. I'm either traveling or making phone calls or planning events, which is part of what we're doing now. And then Saturdays and Sundays is when I do the writing. And so I'm not sitting here for 20 hours writing the note. If it's a week, my weekly notes, I don't devote that much time to it. But the speed of writing has gotten faster as I get older, probably because I think I know it's a bit more relevant to the readers. I hope I do.
Yeah.
So it takes me several hours to read, but I do proofread the heck out of the notes. I don't think there's any spelling errors. So, but
I haven't seen any yet.
yeah,
So.
thank you.
Well, speaking of, so beyond research, talking about events and big things you've got going on,
Right.
can you talk about this Thrive Energy Conference that's coming up and kind of
Sure.
what you do for that?
Make it up as I go. The firm Daniel Energy Partners was started in April 2020. And, I guess I'm a bad guy, but everything I've done since creation of this firm has been in person. So, if I get sick and die, it happens. But I'm like, I'm going to go have fun and I'm going to live my life and I'm going to do the best things that I can to sort of bring people together. And we're all adults who can make our own decisions. So we did Thrive. The first Thrive conference was in February of last year.
Okay.
And
you're getting a lot of industry people. You're getting, I mean, it's heavily
Yes.
industry, but then there are institutional investors.
We're hoping to get the institutional investors.
Okay.
So energy has been sort of unpopular, as you know, for a couple of years.
Yes.
And again, this is going to sound political. It's not meant to be political, but people in Midland and Odessa and Pampa, Texas are more likely to travel for work than someone from Boston, New York, or Chicago,
I
right? It's
agree.
just there's been a different, go to Austin and then go to Midland, and there's a difference in how people are responding, at least there were the last year and a half with COVID. So, as I was traveling across the country in 2020, 2021, I mean, I always was able to do meetings in their offices, et cetera. I didn't really have much pushback. So I knew the industry was wanting to do something. I'm also trying to make a living. I was like, well, let's rent out Minute Maid Ballpark and let's have a conference and let's do batting practice on the field and let's bring folks together. And I'm not going to lie, I was nervous as heck. I tell people I was like 6'4", 240 before planning Thrive, and now I'm 6 foot 145. Like there was a stress level, a significant one, and because I didn't know if we were going to get canceled, and it's not cheap to rent a major league ballpark.
Right.
And so there was a lot on the line, but we ended up having just over 800 people show up. It was a great blessing. I mean, I'm just so thankful for the people that were willing to, sponsor the thing. I mean, yet here you are in COVID, you've never done this event, and you're going to companies like NOV and others and saying, please give me money to sponsor this thing so I don't go broke. And they all stepped up, and it was fantastic. So now we're doing Thrive 22. That's going to be February. The conference itself is the 23rd, 24th. We'll do an opening reception the 22nd. We've got great industry leaders that are coming to present. I'm so excited for that. We just launched the registration last week. We're not IT people at Daniel Energy Partners, so we have had some snafus. So if we screwed up the registration link to you, we apologize. We'll try to fix it.
Right.
We probably did screw it. But we're working on that. And so the registration, it's a rolling process. It's going out now. We will have, we expect about 1,200 people. The thing that I try to do for these events, and this is not OTC, right? We don't have ticket sales. There's nothing wrong with ticket sales. We just choose not to do that. It's really for the subscribers of our product and the sponsors of the event and their guests, and that's it. And so I'm not trying to fill up Minute Maid Park. In fact, I'll cap attendance if I have to. And we want, and I tell people this again, not to be rude, but I go to a lot of trade shows, and this is, as a research analyst, you go to the various trade shows because I'm trying to look for Scooby snacks so I can write my research notes. But a lot of times when I go into these trade shows, I see people that have spent a lot of money on booths. Mm-hmm. And the people that are going up to the booths are people trying to sell people at the booth stuff. You need your customers to be there.
Right.
And there's people who spent a lot of money on these trade shows. And I just thought to myself, well, it seems like a broken model. There's ways to fix it. And so we've have our idea on what's that solution is, and we're trying to implement it. I think we've got it. But keep it affordable. I basically, if there's ever a downturn, I know that budgets are going to get cut, and I want to be the last person that gets cut. So I really don't try to gouge anybody on these events. I tell everyone my numbers if they ask me, so I don't really care. But but get decision makers there, and it's not about getting free candy at the booth.
Right. You're trying to create opportunities for quality interactions for different people.
That's right. So if I bring someone down from Fidelity Investments to Houston for a conference, they don't really care about koozie. I don't mean that we have a koozie sponsor. I love koozies. But that's not why they're coming. They're coming for the content.
Exactly.
Right. And so you better deliver high quality content. You better get impactful speakers, and then you want. We'll have equipment displays, we'll have lots of booths, and we're so thankful for the people that are willing to make that investment to do it. But it's not a huge event. We'll have 10 or 12 outdoor spots. We'll have 30 to 40 indoor booths.
Well, before asking Shelby if she has any questions, I was curious kind of on the content. What are some exciting or topics that you plan to cover? Or kind of what's really getting you intrigued in the industry right now?
Yeah, so we don't let companies do PowerPoint slides. I think that's really boring, and I'll let others that we compete with do PowerPoint slides.
They're moderated conversations, right?
These are moderated conversations. And look, I'm not out there to embarrass anybody. I always tell people this is a discussion. It's not a deposition, right? We're not trying to make you look bad. And again, I'm not going to ask, Clay Williams from NOV, hey, how's the quarter? I don't really care. Mm-hmm. Let's talk strategy. Let's talk opportunities, threats for the business. And we have some panels that are specific discussions on ESG or Others will just be, let's talk about the Permian Basin. And so we'll get a leading operator, leading service company out there. And again, we try to be intentional with who we invite. We've got some, I don't have the agenda in front of me, but it might be on our website. I don't know if it's up there or not yet. I should ask. But we have, like Jose from NOV is going to speak. We're very thankful for that. We've got, Ryan Lance from ConocoPhillips is going to speak. We've got Randy Fowler from Enterprise Products. We have some pretty good speakers, and we'll be serving Fletch Izzle tequila, my favorite brand, even though I don't really drink that much of it. But we'll have good alcohol, and we'll have a fun time. And what we do to make it, again, you can't have a boring conference.
Well, because then people want to skip out like immediately after, I feel like, any conversation or topic. And so then there's no audience participation or audience interaction, which is how you get a big benefit from some of these events.
What we've done to what we think worked is, so we have the ballpark, and on the opening night and after day one panels, we'll have batting practice out on the field. A lot of particularly old guys like to relive their youth and pretend that they can hit it far. And then like the next day, it just smells like Ben Gay because people got muscles and stuff. But we do that for some fun. We rent out, so the panel, you've probably been to Minute Maid Park, but
yes.
It's the conference is in the train station.
Okay.
And then we've got the booths along the mezzanine level, and then we rent out the suite level. So a lot of companies will have suites. And so therefore, if NOV wants to entertain clients in the suite, good, it's great. Do whatever you want. But you can also watch the panels from the suites. We have the panels broadcast on the big screen, so you can sit in the stands. So if you're worried about social distancing,
right.
1,200 people in a 40,000 person stadium, you should have some space. Mm-hmm. And so we try to do that. And then, but that's our big event. We did the barbecue in Midland. I don't know if you came out, but for those who aren't vegan, we invite people to come to Midland for the barbecue. And we had like 58 companies cooking there. And then we do some more smaller events that aren't really big conferences, but we do an event in Telluride. We do one in Scotland. We'll do lots of other stuff.
So you're going like connection heavy.
Make it fun.
Yeah, I feel like they're connection heavy and content rich.
That's the objective, right? Yep. You did investor relations, if I recall correctly. How many times would you go to a conference and you get stick you in a hotel room to do meetings, or you do the 30-minute speed dating one-on-ones, where half the time the person asking you questions doesn't really understand the business? Well, the best one-on-one is on a golf course or at the bar or fishing. That's where you develop a personal relationship. And so that's how we are going to do all of our events, is make them personal as best we possibly can.
Well, and I think too, for those who don't golf or don't fish, there are probably opportunities to create something similar, but it's just, it's quality interaction.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
That's right. And that's exactly right.
Shelby, any questions that we want to add in here? I feel like I could talk to John forever.
Yeah, we actually have a couple. And the first one, it might be the first time that I get to answer a question. We actually got a question from Basil. He was wanting to know the link for the Thrive conference. So we're going to have that on screen. But you can go to www.danielep.com/events, and it has all the information there. So I was just so excited to see one that I could answer.
Kudos.
Yes, thank you. But we do have actual ones for you, John. So this first one, let me get this pulled up on LinkedIn, is from Winston, and he was wondering. You mentioned, I know we are always a little bit wary of crystal balls and projecting, telling the future, because like you said, it can change. But Winston was wondering, in your opinion, what's the future of energy production?
Well, energy production being defined as oil or natural gas, but oil production is rising as activity rises. I think the EIA just came out with their short-term energy outlook yesterday. I haven't read it in detail yet, but I know that they're calling for U.S. oil, I think, if I'm not mistaken, U.S. oil production to be in excess of what it was at the last peak next year. Mm-hmm. Again, I better go reread that. I was catching snippets on FactSet this morning, so if I'm wrong, I will correct. But what we're seeing in terms of activity is depends on which rig count you want to use. I use the Baker rig count just because it's free.
Right.
I'm cheap. And so I think as of last week, it's 570 rigs. Our view is that it kind of gets in that mid 600 range, middle of this year. We are on the frac crew count. Again, different people have different ideas. Our view is that the U.S. active crew count, I'm actually updating it as we speak, is right around that 235 mark in terms of active. And then what's working is a bit less. I think there's people have to distinguish between active and call it effective or fully utilized.
Right.
But you're probably looking at another 20 to 30 fleets that go out at some point this year. You certainly have a constructive backdrop on commodity price. The challenge is Lydia, there's this whole theme of capital discipline.
That's exactly
which
what I was about to bring
which
up.
I find
Capital restraints.
it's very boring, right? But it's like stable and focused on cash flow. And so I think a lot of these public companies are going to continue to be mindful of returns, which is
Right.
what they need to do from a stock price perspective. And I don't think it's not going to be pedal to the metal as it would have been in the yesteryear. So slow and steady growth, and
It should be good for
you
oil
know, that's-
prices. So we'll see.
Yeah, thank you. And this next question, actually, it's one that we've asked before and that I always love getting to ask again. And you mentioned that sometimes the energy industry or, oil and gas can get a bad rep out there. And so the question is, what advice would you give to everyone working in the industry, regardless of role, title, position? What can we each do to kind of help improve that image and help show people the other side of energy?
Well,
That's a big
I'm a
one.
big fan of people like what Chris Wright has done over at Liberty in terms of sort of
The
calling
Patagonia billboards.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everything we use uses oil. There's so many things are oil-based products. Let's go to Boston in the winter and say, how would you like to not have heat?
So
Right?
just
I don't-
calling
I
it.
mean, you don't want to be rude about it, but I don't think, I don't know how you solve it. I mean, is the person who watches CNN really going to want to learn about U.S. energy and what we're doing to clean up? Probably not. I don't have great pearls of wisdom on this. I just know that we are critical, and we as an industry have to do a better job. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, you look at what some of the companies, look what NOV is doing, designing electric frac technology. How many companies,
Right.
the major engine companies focusing on dual fuel technology. Look at, I mean, we hear a lot about ESG, but ESG, there's a lot of things that go into ESG. It's not just environment, it's social, it's governance, and people are awake to this as they should be. And I give a huge shout out to Leslie Beyer at the Energy Workforce and Technology Council that has just been, teaching and educating folks on what we need to do.
Right.
I try to use LinkedIn occasionally, and I mean, this is not lost. Well, hopefully it's not lost on the leadership of companies. Now you got to push that down to the field level, and there might be some people who don't like change, and it is what it is. But we're working on it, and I think all you have to do is read a sustainability report, and they're kind of boring, by the way, but read what these companies are doing. They're focused on it, right? I mean, in energy transition, I mean, I don't think I would have heard NOV talking about energy transition 2 years ago.
No.
And it's now what people are talking about. And that's not meant to be rude. Everybody is awake to this energy storage technology, whatever it might be. But we have to make an investment in it. But for the service companies to make that investment, they actually have to make money,
Right.
which means they have to get their prices up. So, I mean, there's a lot that has to happen here. And there's a financial benefit to companies to really knock the cover off the ball on ESG, because at that point you can attract different level of investor base that you might not be able to otherwise attract. So
Definitely.
it's a big deal.
Well, I think there's definitely the kind of on the ESG side and then energy transitions making the investments for all the points that you mentioned. But then I think in a broader view of even what you just said of the energy industry is critical, right?
Yes.
And communicating that message. But then also one thing that I find troublesome is when people in the energy industry kind of go, well, it's oil and gas or else. And not even necessarily that, but where it's almost, it's kind of can take an abrasive tone or just like, well, how far can you get in your electric vehicle? Like, don't you need natural gas? And kind of take that view where I think it's, yes, you have to say the industry is critical. Here are all these things that we do, but we recognize that there are these other things that are happening, but it's not a either or conversation. We're looking at all sources, diverse sources, because we have to meet growing demand.
I think that's right. I'm probably not the right expert on how you can communicate it to make everybody happy. I'd probably screw it up, but you're absolutely right.
You would,
And you almost have to take the same approach with the environmental matters as you do with, think back to safety in the oil field. I mean,
right.
look at the tremendous gains we've made through technology and product design enhancement, and just the emphasis we've had on teaching people with training programs on how to focus on safety. I saw that develop in my days at Key, and you look at the OSHA oil rates that come down and down and down because of whether it be things that remove hands from connecting pipe or whatever it might be. We have to take that same approach and apply it to other things.
Right. And you have to make money on it, which I think is.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot expect a business to invest in clean technology when
because
they're
it
broke.
feels good. Yeah. No, I agree.
I mean, the companies have to make a return.
Right. So,
So,
well, Shelby, anything else, or are we there?
Yeah, I'll just make one final reminder for our audience. If you like this episode and maybe want to watch it again or want to watch any of our past episodes, including we actually had Leslie Beyer on the show about.
Oh, great.
she's awesome.
Yeah, about 7 months ago. She is awesome. So if you want to catch that episode, or like I said, rewatch this one or any of our shows, you can do that at www.nov.com/live. So I can't help myself. I gotta plug that. But thank you so much, John, for coming on, and I'll give it back to you, Lydia.
Yeah, John, thank you for sharing your insights, a little bit about what it's like to be out in the field, the approach that you take, and adding some new perspective. I really enjoyed it, and seriously, could continue talking to you for a long time. So thank you for making the effort.
Anytime. Take
All
care.
right. Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you soon.